Hi, this is Shahed Chowdhuri of Microsoft, here to talk about Construct 2 game development. We hope you enjoy it. Today we'll learn how you can build a game from scratch using Construct 2 by Sira. The first step should be for you to download Construct 2 from the Sira website. That's scirra.com. There's a free version of Construct 2 that you can use to build a lot of games, and as soon as you're ready to go commercial, you can purchase the commercial version, which is very affordable and used by developers all around the world. In this tutorial, we'll learn how to make a space shooter game. This game will have two spaceships on the screen with a night sky behind them, while falling rocks are coming at them, and they'll be shooting at the rocks with lasers. As you can see from the top left and the top right areas, each player can get their own score as they're shooting down the rocks. First of all, we'll learn how to insert new objects into Construct 2. In order to do this, let's take a look at what our UI looks like. The UI is the user interface for Construct 2, which contains a layout where you will add each of these objects. The objects we'll add are the background for the game, the explosions and lasers, some text for the score, the spaceships that you'll see on the screen, the falling rocks, and finally, keyboard functionality. Let's take a look at what Construct 2 looks like. Here you can see a complete version of the game, where I can click on the play button on the top area. So if you look closer here, it says Run Layout, and by clicking on Run Layout, I can actually run the game. I'm going to maximize my browser window, and I'll use my arrow keys to move the second player left and right. For the first player, I'm using my keys A and D to move the player left and right. If I click W on my keyboard, I can shoot from the first player. If I click up arrow on my second player, I can shoot from the second player. So by moving left and right, I can shoot at the rocks, and as soon as I've shot a rock, I can get points for that player. So we'll learn how to build this game from scratch. Let's go ahead and close this browser, and let's take it from there. Now let's go ahead and close this project by clicking on File and Close Project, and we will start with a brand new project. If I click File, New, I'm faced with a stream of endless templates that I can use to make my game. But for my first game, I'll click New Empty Project. That's the first option in the list. When I click Open, it shows me a blank layout. Now I can click on the layout and use my Control key and the scroll wheel on my mouse to zoom out to make sure that I can see more of this layout. Now let's go ahead and organize this layout a little. On the right area, I have what's called a Projects panel. In the Projects panel, you'll notice you have one layout and one event sheet. We'll learn in a few minutes what an event sheet will do for your layout. So what we'll do right now is to reorganize the width and height of what you're looking at. If I click on Layout itself, on the left side, I can see the layout size. Right now, the layout size is pretty big. It's a 1708 and 960. Let's make it match the screen size. So again, on the right, if I click on New Project over here, let's take a look at what size it has. On the left side, you'll see the width of this project is actually 854 by 480, and that's our window size. So let's make that into our layout side as well. I can actually click on the window size values and type Control C on my keyboard. And then on the right, I'll go ahead and double click on the layout. And back on the left side, for the layout size, I will click Control V to paste the size in there. So what I've done is change the layout size to 854 by 480 to match the width size of the window. So now you'll notice that the layout and the window have the same size. There's no extra space around it. Now we're ready to add our objects. If you right click and insert new object, you'll notice I have the ability to add all sorts of objects. In this case, I'll scroll down to tiled background. So if I go ahead and click tiled background, let's give it a name. Let's call it BG. I'll click insert. Now I can click anywhere on the screen. It'll prompt me to insert a new image. So if you zoom into this, it has a lot of icons. And the second icon looks like an opening folder, and that's what we want. So we'll go ahead and click on that second icon, and that allows me to load an image from a file. So let's go ahead and load this purple background. Click Open, and now we're ready to close this Edit Image window. Let's go ahead and close it. And you'll notice that your layout is not aligned with the background. So easiest way to align the background image is to go ahead and change the position and the size. So on the left here, you'll notice that the position and the size is not what we want it to be. We'd like the position to be on the top left corner, so it should have a coordinate system of 0 and 0. So the way we do that is for the position, I'm going to type in 0, 0. Oops. Let me type 0, 0, hit enter. And now it's aligned to the top left. For the size, I would like to enter the size we had for the layout itself, which is 854 and 480. So once I change the size, you'll notice that the background now matches the size. Now we're ready to add additional objects. If I right-click on the screen again and add Insert New Object, I can select Sprite, and I can add additional objects. Now, instead of adding all the objects manually, I could also drag them into the screen from my Explorer window. So if I were to come to my Explorer window where I have all my images, I can drag each of these into the screen one by one. But for now, let's show you how to add a sprite through the Insert New Object. So let's go ahead and add one for the new player. So let's call it Player 1. So I've named it Player 1, and I've chosen the sprite type. If I click the Insert button, I can now click anywhere on the screen. And once again, I'm faced with a similar edit window for my image. So similar to how we loaded the background image, we're going to click the open icon to load a new image for our spaceship. So I'm going to go ahead and select Player Ship 1, Red, to be my first player. And one thing I'll notice is that when I close this window, there is a little line that points to the right, which is the front of my object. And I actually don't want the front of my spaceship to be on the side of the spaceship. I'd like it to be on the first part of the spaceship. So let's go ahead and double click on that spaceship again. And this time I will rotate it to the side so that it's pointing in the correct direction. Next thing I'd like to do is I would like to change what's called an image point. That's where the lasers will come out from the spaceship. To add a new image point, there is a little icon here on the lower left area. Let me zoom in on that, where you can set an image point. When I click on it, it shows that it already has one image point, which is the origin, but I'd like to add another image point by clicking on the plus icon. So once I click on the plus icon, notice that it adds one image point called image point 1 and adds a number to it. While that's selected, I'll go ahead and click the front part of the spaceship. So what we've done right now is made sure that the lasers will come out from the front of the ship. Let's go ahead and close that. But you'll notice that the spaceship is still pointing to the right. We'd like to point upwards. So we can actually rotate this image right now. Let's bring it down to the lower left area and change the angle of our spaceship and make it 270. What that'll do is it rotates the spaceship around and makes it point upwards. And would like to do this for the second spaceship as well. So let's try and do it for the second spaceship. Right-clicking on a blank area on the right, I click Insert New Object. Then I choose Sprite, and I'm going to type in Player 2. Once I click Insert, I can click on the right area and click on the Open button to load a new spaceship, in this case, the blue spaceship. Let me go ahead and rotate the spaceship once to the right. And for the image point, I'll click the plus sign and then click the front of the spaceship. So again, we've done the exact same thing for the second spaceship and would like to make sure that it has an angle of 270. So again, to the left, you will see the angle is currently 0, but making it 270 ensures that it is initially pointing upward. So while we're on this layout screen, let's go ahead and add a rock to the screen so the rocks can be falling from the top of the sky. I will right-click, Insert New Object, select sprite one more time, and type in the word rock. When I click insert, I can click anywhere on the screen and then click on the load an image icon. Once I select this meteor image for my rock, I can go ahead and close it as there's nothing else for me to do here. So now there's a rock on the screen. So we need lasers and explosions as well. So if we right click and insert new object one more time, we're going to add two lasers. So let's say sprite. Let's call it laser red. Click insert. We can click outside. And we'll explain in a minute why it's outside. But first of all, we're going to open and select the red laser. And then close it. And then we'll insert new object and add a laser that's blue. So let's add that outside as well. Select the blue laser object and then close it. And finally, we'll add an explosion. So I right click, insert new object, add my last sprite and call it explosion. Insert, click outside, click open, and choose the explosion. So by now you'll notice we've added the two lasers, the rock, the two spaceships, and the background. So once we add the explosion, we'll notice that the explosion has a little bit of a black background around it. Let's zoom out a little by clicking Control on the keyboard and scrolling out with the mouse wheel and move the explosion away from the screen. And we'll figure out a way to make the black part not show up right now. So let's go back to our presentation and see what else we can do with this. So now we've added background, explosion, lasers, spaceships, rock, but we'll notice there's a couple of other things here, such as the score text and the keyboard functionality and function functionality that we haven't added yet. These are actually required for us to be able to take in keyboard input, display a score on the screen, and also use functions in Construct 2. So let's go ahead and add those as well. So I'm going to switch over to Construct 2. If I right click here and say insert new object, there is an object called function. If I scroll down in the list, and you'll notice that I have a lot of different things I can choose from. Let's go back up. So basically we have our text box, and we have our keyboard, and we have our function. So if I choose function right now and insert it, you'll notice that nothing really happened on the screen, but there's a message up here on the left that says added function. This object is available to the entire project. So this adds a feature in our game to use functions in Construct 2. On the right here in the projects panel, you'll notice there's a functions object right in the middle. So let's go ahead and add keyboard as well. So if I right click, insert new object, and choose the keyboard object, I'll hit insert. And similar to function, you'll notice that on the left side, it says added keyboard. This object is available to the entire project. And again, on the right, you'll notice that the keyboard object has been added to our list of objects. Finally, we'd like to add two text boxes for the score. So let's right click here, click insert new object, and then choose the text object, and we'll call it text1 for the first player. So let's call it actually score 1 text. How about that? Score 1 text. There you go. And insert. And we'll insert in the left side. Right now it's a little difficult to see, so we're going to change some properties for it. So you'll notice once I have text selected, the properties panel on the left shows you all the properties for score 1 text. So we're going to make it a better font so we can actually see it. Let's go ahead and change the font size. So scroll down a little. Now let's change the font so it's a better color. If I click on the font color, change it to maybe a yellowish font, and change the font name to something that's more visible. How about Courier New? And then make it 0.20 for the size. So you'll notice that I might have to change the size of the box, but I can now change the text that appears on it. So the text I wanted to say P1 : and a space. Let's add another one to the right. Insert new object, text, P2, score text. I'll click on the right area, and it's added a new one, and I'll do the similar thing here. P2 for the text, and then font color and font size, I'll change it so that it's Courier New. Make it 20 point, click OK, and then change that color to maybe a yellowish color, make it a little bigger so we can see it better. You'll notice that the first one on the left, it's called Score 1 Text, and on the right, I called it P2 Score Text. Let's change that to Score 2 Text. So this is an example of how you can change names of things after they've already been created. So now we have the two text boxes for the scores. This is a great way to get started with our development for this game. Let's switch back to the presentation to see what we added. We added a text box for the scores, and we added certain colors to it. And now we can see P1 and P2. But we still haven't added any behaviors yet. So there are a lot of behaviors in Construct 2, and that's what allows your game objects to behave in a certain way. But some of the behaviors we'll work with today are platform, bound to layout, flash, physics, fade, bullet, and destroy outside layout. Each of these have very specific functionality, so let's talk about what they do. But first of all, let's focus on one of the objects one at a time. So if I switch back to Construct 2, click on my player object, I can actually click on the behaviors link on the left. Might be a little hard to see, but once it's selected, you'll notice that there's a link that says behaviors. If I click on that, it pulls up a new window that lets me add behaviors one by one. So let's go ahead and click on that plus sign to add a new behavior. So we mentioned that we'd be adding the platform behavior. So if you don't see it on the list, on the top right, you can start typing platform and it will appear. So I click on that and add it. You'll notice I now have one platform. I click on plus again. I'd like to add one for destroy outside layout. So again, I started typing DES on the top right and it shows it to me. And I click add. The third thing I'd like to add is flash. So if I click add new, in this case, instead of going up and down or trying to type it in, I can select flash right here in the middle. So there's different ways of adding behaviors. So now we have three different things we've added. One thing you'll notice is that you might be wondering, what is this platform behavior? Well, platform allows your player to move left and right, also jump up and down. In this case, we don't want to move the player jumping up and down, and we don't want it to be controlled automatically with their default controls. So we'd like to actually disable the default controls. We'll want to do the same thing for the other player as well. So let's go ahead and click on the other player and then click on the behaviors link. I'm going to click plus, and I can add destroy outside layout and fade and platform. So let's click on platform first, click add. When I click plus, I can select destroy outside layout and add. And finally, I click plus again, and I'm going to add flash and add as well. So now I've added these three behaviors, and how do we know what we should be changing? Let's go back to our presentation slide and take a look at all the details. Here I've given you some examples for players, rocks, explosions, and lasers. So the player in this case has been angled to 270. We added platform behavior and bound to layout behavior. And we've disabled rather the default controls. But what about this gravity? So if we look in a little closer here for the player on the left side, we'll notice that gravity has also been set to 0. So let's go ahead and select the gravity and set it to 0. So I'm going to switch back to Construct 2. And for the first player, set gravity to 0, hit enter. For the second player, I'm going to do the same thing, also set gravity to 0. So basically, you don't want your players just falling out of the sky. You don't want it to be affected by gravity. You might be wondering why we added flash. Basically, when the rocks fall on the spaceships, we want the flash to be affected, and the player will flash for a couple of a second. So back on the screen, you'll notice there's a lot of properties for the rock as well, which is the second panel here. So the rock panel shows you that I added physics behavior, and I also added destroy outside layout. So let's go ahead and add those. So switching back to construct 2, I'm going to click on the rock, and I'll add 2 behaviors by clicking on the behaviors link. One will be destroy outside layout, click add. And the second one, when I click add again, I actually want to go ahead and make sure that it behaves the way I want it to. I'll click add, and you'll notice that I added destroy outside layout and physics behavior for this rock. Let's go ahead and check our PowerPoint slide to see what it looks like. The next thing we have is explosion, where I'll need to add fade behavior, and we'll need to add fade out time of 0.5, and finally change the effects mode. Let's explain what that does. So going back to construct 2, for the explosion, I'm going to create a new behavior and choose fade. And again, I just typed the letter F, which changed the screen to only show things that have the letter F in it. So click fade, add, and I want to change the fade in time and the fade out time. In this case, the fade out time should be good enough. Make it 0.5. And you'll notice that I also changed the blend mode as well in the screenshot. So let's change the blend mode from normal to additive. Now what does that do? When I change normal to additive, it makes sure that the background of this explosion is no longer black, and it blends in nicely with the main background. Let's go ahead and close that. And finally, we have the laser properties. I've shown you an example here for laser red, but would like to do the same thing for laser red and laser blue. Let's change the angle and make it a smaller size and make sure it has the correct behavior we want. In this case, the behaviors are destroy outside layout and bullet. Let's go ahead and do those one by one. So for each of those lasers, we want to add destroy outside layout. Click add. And then we also want to add bullet behavior. For the red one, I'm going to close this and add new behaviors. Again, destroy outside layout. And hit plus one more time and click bullet behavior. Now we do want it to look a little smaller because they're kind of long for this spaceship. So let's change the size to be 13, 13. Hit enter. And for the blue one, I'll do the same, 13, 13. So is that all that we had for these bullets? If we go back to the slide, we'll notice that the angle is also supposed to be at 270. This is similar to what we did for the spaceships. So let's go ahead and change that as well. So for the blue one, let's make sure that we can change the angle so it's pointing the right way. So if we go ahead and double click on it, we're going to rotate it once so it points the right way and change that angle to be 270. Enter. And for the red one, I'm going to go ahead and do the same thing. Rotate the angle. When I close it, I'm going to change angle to be 270. That makes sure that everything looks good. But one thing you'll notice is the size also changed on this. So let's fix the sizes again. Let's make that 13 and 13. So it still looks like a square. And then for the blue, let's make that 13 and 13 again. So what we've done right now is for each laser, we've added destroy outside layout behavior, bullet behavior. We've changed the size to 13 by 13. And we've also changed the angle to 270. So if we go back to our display, we'll notice that we've made all the changes that I've highlighted in these screenshots. So the next thing we have is to add our global variables. We need a way to keep score. But you'll also notice I've now switched from our layout to our event sheet. Let's see what that looks like. Now let's switch back to construct 2 so we can add our global variables. So I can go to the event sheet. If you go look at, take a closer look where you have layout 1 and event sheet 1. I will click on event sheet 1 and I can right click here and add global variable. Let's call the first one P1 score, which will be a number with an initial value of 0. And I click OK. Let's add a second one and call it P2 score. It'll also be of type number with an initial value of 0. I click OK, and you'll notice the P2 score is above P1 score, which doesn't really matter, but if you want to be above it, you can actually click the bottom one and drag it up. So now it's in the correct order that I want it to be in. If I go back to the slide, you'll notice it exactly the way we want it. So let's go to the next slide. In this case, we're going to be adding controls for player 1 and player 2 to move left and right, and also shoot lasers. So let's go and do that piece by piece. So back in Construct 2, I can right-click and add an event. So the event I want to add is on the keyboard. Click Next after selecting keyboard, and I'd like to say on key pressed, I want it to behave in a certain way, or on key down, I'd like to behave in a certain way. So you would use the key down event if you wanted to trigger when the key is held down. The key press does it as soon as the key is pressed. So let's go back to the screenshot and explain to you how this works. When A is down, we'd like to shoot left or right, but when W is pressed, we like to shoot the lasers. So again, we're either moving the player left and right or we're shooting lasers. So let's go back to Construct 2 and say on key down and click Next. And this time, let's choose a key and say if we want it to be the A key. So I'm pressing A on my keyboard and it automatically puts in a key in there. So let's go ahead and press A again. And I click OK and click Done. So now it says when keyboard A is down, we want it to move left. So click Add Action, click the first player, player 1, and now I want to simulate controls. Instead of scrolling down to find simulate, I can type in SIM and it finds simulate control for me. I'll click Next, and I would like to select control going left. Let's add another event. I clicked on Add Event, click Keyboard, click Next, and this time I want it to simulate going right. So when I say key is down, click Next, and for the key, I want to press the right arrow key, click OK, and then click Done. But notice that that's not what I meant to do. I actually made a mistake here. I actually want to use the D arrow key. So I'd like to exchange that for another condition. I can always right-click on here and say Replace Condition, and let me select Keyboard again, click Next, and say Key is down, and hit Next. And this time, I'll choose D on my keyboard and click OK. What I've done right now is showing you that you can make changes without having to delete something and re-add it. So let's go ahead and add an action for player 1 and click Next. I'm going to type in Simulate Control, click on Simulate Control, click Next, and then this time I want it to go right. So now I've enabled it to go left and right based on the A and D arrow keys. Finally, I want it to shoot lasers. So I'll click Add Event, Keyboard, Next. So for on key pressed, Next. And for the key that I want to choose is the W arrow key, or rather the W key. Click down, or Done, and then add an action for that. In this case, I want the player 1 to spawn a laser, or rather a red laser, right? So select player 1 and start typing in spawn, and I can choose spawn another object. And for the type of object I want to spawn, I want it to be a red laser object. Click OK. And I can say layer 0, but I do want to change the image point to 1 so that it shoots from the front of the spaceship. Let's repeat this again for player 2. We'll move a little faster this time. Click Add Event, click Keyboard, Next, on key down, or key is down, Next. For the key that I want to choose, I'll hit the left arrow key on my keyboard, click OK, and Done. The action for this will be player 2, Next, Simulate Control, Next, Left. I'll repeat that for keyboard for the right arrow being pressed. So I'll say on key down, or key is down, key right, click OK, click Done, and this time we'll choose player 2, Next, Simulate Control, and this time we'll choose right. So now we have 2 arrow keys for the player moving left and right. We'll choose Add Event and say that when the keyboard is being pressed on key pressed, and we want the up arrow key. Click OK, click Done, and we'd like to shoot a laser out of player 2. So click player 2, and we want to spawn another object. The object we choose is this time the blue laser. Click OK. And again, remember to choose image point 1 and click OK. So at this point, we should have keys going left and right. Let's run this game to see how it goes. But first of all, let's save the game. There's a little save icon on the top left, but I can also hit Control S on my keyboard. So it's asking me if I want to save it. Let's go ahead and save it as a demo. And then I can click on the Run Layout button on the top to run the game to see how it works. So in this case, I'm actually shooting lasers out of my spaceships. I'm moving left and right. But you notice that there was a rock at the very beginning, it just fell and disappeared, which is fine. At least I have my players. But you'll notice that also the player just moved out of the screen. How do I get the player back? Let's go ahead and fix that. Let's close the window and go back to our layout and click on the red player. We'll notice that I had added platform behavior, destroy outside layout, but I actually meant to add bound to layout. This was a mistake on my part. So how do we go ahead and change that? The easiest way to add it is to click on behaviors, and instead of destroy outside layout, we actually want it to be bound within the layout. So let's go ahead and remove that. And it says, do you want to remove it? I say yes. And let's add bound to layout. Click add and close that. And for the blue player, we'll do the same thing. Click on behaviors. We're going to remove destroy outside layout by clicking on the delete icon right here. And it says, do you want to delete it? We say yes. And finally, we click plus to add bound to layout and click add. So this goes to show you Construct 2 is very forgiving, and you can go ahead and do different things in your game. You can take things back, change things without having to go back and try it again. Let's run it again right now. So move left and right, and now you'll notice we can't actually leave the screen. We can still shoot, and we can move left and right. So that works really well. So let's go ahead and close it and take a look at what our PowerPoint shows us. On the next screen, we'll see that we need to create rock objects. Now back to Construct 2, we need to make sure that we can add a rock that shows up every 2 seconds. So let's go ahead and add a new event and choose System and click Next. And we'll start typing in every X seconds, which is right here. Click Next. And we'll type in 2 for the number of seconds. The action we'll add when we click an Add Action is for a rock to be generated. So we have to click System to generate a new object. And for System, we type in Create Object. So again, we can select it from the list. And the object to create, in this case, is a rock. Click OK. We'll leave the layer at 0. The X will change to a random number. We'll type in the word random and say anywhere from 0 to layout width. The way that works is it'll generate a new rock anywhere from the left to the right of the screen. And if I put in 10 for the Y value, it will be 10 pixels away from the top of the screen. So that's what that looks like. All right, you have random, 0 to layout width, and a value of 10 for the number of pixels from the top of the screen. We'll click Done, and that should generate your rock coming from the top of the screen. Let's go back to the screenshot and see that we have exactly what we want. And let's take a look at the next screenshot. So here we have on destroy rock. It'll create an explosion, but also destroy the rock. So how is that done? We'll see how functions work in Construct 2. When I click Add Event and select the function object, I can say on function and click Next and start typing in destroy rock and click Done. And the first action I want is to be able to generate that explosion. So I say System and start select System, click Next, and start typing in Create Object. Click Next, and this time I choose an explosion object. Click OK. And for the X value, I will choose rock.x. Y value, I'll type rock.y. So the way that works is, let me change that to lowercase r. The way that works is it will generate a new explosion, exactly the place where the rock was last seen. So I can actually click Add Action and say Rock, click Next, and start typing in the word Destroy. Select Destroy, and click Done. So now it will create the explosion and destroy the rock. But there's no way to select this function right now, just the definition of a function. We need to be able to call this function. So we'll take a look at that next with our collisions. So let's take a look at how to generate those collisions. So again, on the next screen, we're going to focus on generating collisions for player 1 with a rock. So when the rock collides with player 1, we want player 1 to flash for a few seconds, or rather for maybe 1 second or half a second, whatever makes sense for your game. So let's click on Add Event and say we choose rock, click Next, and start typing in on collision. We'll select on collision with another object, click Next, and in this case we'll say when player 1 is hit, we click Done. For Add Action, we choose that first player again, click Next, and we want the player to start flashing. So let's start typing in the word flash, and just select Flash, click Next, and we'll select the default options, click Done. Let's repeat the same thing for player 2. Again, rock, click Next, start typing in on collision with another object, click Next, and this time we choose player 2 as the collision, click Done, and the action for this will be player 2, flash. Let's start typing in flash, we click Next, and again choose the default numbers. So this time when the rock hits player 2 will start to flash. Finally, let's figure out what happens when the rocks get hit by lasers. So again, back to the screenshots. Click Next. We see that when the red laser hits a rock, we call the function add the score to P1 score, and we're going to update the text box. Let's go ahead and click and add an event for the red laser. Click Next and say that when the red laser collides with a rock, so we want to do 3 things. Now, what were those 3 things? Again, in Construct 2, you don't have to memorize anything. You can experiment. You can try different things. In my case, I had called a function to destroy the rock. I added 1 to the score, and I displayed it on the screen. There's nothing mystical about that. We're going to go ahead and add each of these. So going back to Construct 2, I click Add Action, and this time I choose Function. Click Next. Now say Call Function. Click Next. This time I can start typing in the word Destroy Rock. Fortunately, Construct 2 knows I have a function named Destroy Rock, so I can actually hit Tab on my keyboard, and it'll complete it for me, which is very convenient. So the next 2 things I want to do is update the score. So I click Add Action, and I'll go to System, and click Next, and start typing in Add, and it gives me an option to add to. So when I click Next, you'll notice it already has P1 score in this drop-down, so I want to add 1 to P1 score, and finally update the text box. So the last action I add is score 1 text, click Next, and start typing in the text for that, so which will be set text, click Next, and in this case, I can choose to type in some text in double quotes, and with this ampersand, I can choose to add the score to it. So these are 2 different values. P1 is a text value, and P1 score is a variable. So I can concatenate or connect together P1 and P1 score together to display on the screen. So click OK, and that makes sure that the score gets updated. And finally, I'll add another event and say laser blue. Click Next. On collision with another object, click Next. And this time I will choose player 2, or rather the rock, and click OK, and click Done. So in this case, laser blue touches the rock. I still want to destroy the rock, so I click the function, click Next, and for call function, I click Next and start typing destroy rock. I can hit Tab on my keyboard so it completes it, click Done, and in this time I want to click System so I can add 1 to the score. So again, start typing add 2, click Next, and then this time make sure I select P2 score instead of P1, and Done. Then I can choose score 2 text for my next action, and then make sure that I can set the text correctly, Click Next. And the text I want to select is P2 colon ampersand P2 score. So again, when it shows your variable, you can hit Tab on your keyboard to complete it. So again, this is what it looks like. You have P2 in quotes, showing that it's inside a text box. And then we can start typing the rest of the variable. So let's click Done and see what that looks like. So going back to our screenshots, we've added the ability to destroy a rock. We added one to the score, and we're displaying it on the screen. Now we're ready to actually play our game. So let's see how that works. So let's go ahead and run our game. Let's make the screen really big. I'm going to move left and right on my keyboard. I still don't have any points. I'm getting hit by the rocks. Oh, look, player 2 has hit one item, and player 1 has hit one item 2. Player 2 just got the second rock, almost got the third. So as I'm hitting each of the rocks, I can actually get lots of points, and each of the players can compete with each other. So this is actually the end of our tutorial. We've now built a complete game that's 2 players, and we're able to get some scores on the screen. We've learned about variables, functions, and objects. So let's go ahead and close the browser window and go back to the end of our slides. And the last slide here, you'll notice I have links for resources and different communities on the internet about Construct 2. You can go to my Construct 2 index page on my website, wakeupandcode.com, which is wakeupandcode.com/construct2. And finally, there are 2 Facebook groups I'd like you to join. One of them specifically for Construct 2 developers around the world that I've been running for the past year or so. And there's another one just for Brazil called Construct 2 BR. And when you get a chance to watch some additional videos, my colleague and I have actually produced a couple of videos on Microsoft Virtual Academy, and for that I've provided another link as well. So take a minute to write these down, and we hope you had fun with our tutorial today. Thanks for watching this intro tutorial to Construct 2 game development. We hope you enjoyed it,